everyone, and welcome to another edition of the vAuto podcast. I'm Lance Helgeson with vAuto, and I'll be your host for today's episode. For this podcast, we're going to take a closer look at how one independent dealer in Chicago is managing what has become a big challenge for every dealer: how to get the cars you need from auctions and elsewhere and buy them as right as you can. My guests are Vaida Presniakovaite, dealer principal at Midway Autohaus in Chicago, and Patrick James, director of business development for vAuto's Stockwave solution. Vaida and Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Good morning, Lance. Glad to be here.
Indeed. Sounds like we got a dog joining us today.
You know, it was the Ring camera sensor that just triggered her because we have the same thing. So she knows.
No. Is that what went off? Because it went off on my phone because I didn't have it off. I got to completely turn my phone off because it went off over the top.
All good.
She barks when she knows that's what it is? Yeah.
Correct.
That's a good.
She's a good dog. She's a really good dog.
Yeah, well trained. Well, let's jump into the podcast here. Vaida, if you would, please tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be the dealer principal at Midway Autohaus.
Absolutely. So my career in the automotive industry actually started out in sales at a Mercedes store in Chicago, Mercedes-Benz of Chicago. So I think that for my first few years, I had the opportunity to learn the business from people who have a superior knowledge of it. Some of the best guys in the business. I still believe that to this day. So during my tenure there, I was just like a sponge, right? Trying to soak it all up, soak it all in. I fell in love with the business, had no idea that that was something that I wanted to do prior ever, right? And then during my career there, my father had the opportunity to acquire these two used car stores, which are Midway Autohaus today. And when I felt like I was ready for the training wheels to come off, I overtook overseeing the operations of the family business.
Fantastic. So second generation dealer, it sounds like.
Correct.
Awesome. And maybe our listeners would also benefit from just knowing a little bit more about your dealership. Like, could you tell us how many vehicles you stock in a given month and maybe the kind of cars that you consider the sweet spot for what you're doing?
Sure. So currently we're stocking about 100 vehicles on a monthly basis. We turn 60 to 70% of that on a monthly basis. We have a very diverse mix of inventory, I would say, too. And we have a very mixed demographic in our area, too, right? So we're able to capture some prime business, a little bit of subprime, a lot of subprime, I should say. So it's kind of all over the place. But our sweet spot has been for at least the last year and a half. It's that unicorn, that nice car between $10,000 to $15,000.
Aha. Okay. Well, let's talk about how you're filling those holes in the inventory there. Why did that become your sweet spot, or was it sort of always a sweet spot, but that has just in the last 2 years really become what's driving the business?
I think we saw a significant change in the market and people's budgets, and kind of some lifestyle changes in our demographic. It's been a result of that, and I think that it's been definitely just a change of focus from us, right, and the direction that we want to take. As much as I would love to stack a lot full of almost brand new off-lease Highline, pretty Mercedeses and Audis and, your luxury vehicles, right? What we have found using Stockwave, as a tool, and it's been a big help in that doesn't work for our store, right? That's not where we get our high volume from. And those vehicles tend to age on the lot. And a lot of the times we find ourselves asking these questions, right? I mean, here we have a really nice car for $30,000, and here we have a not so nice car for $15,000. That $15,000 car will always still sell quicker than my nice $30,000 car, right? So it's kind of a no-brainer for us. Why should I go out to the auctions and tie up $40,000 or $50,000 in capital, right? When I can go out there and buy maybe 3-4 cars with that capital allocation.
And turn them in the same amount of time as it would have taken you to turn the other.
That is correct.
Okay. Now you mentioned Stockwave, Vaida. When did you guys make the adoption of Stockwave at your store? And if you would, could I get a glimpse of what buying and appraising cars was like before Stockwave?
Sure. We started implementing Stockwave into our processes, I would say sometime late at the end of 2019, right? So prior to COVID, prior to 2020. And I remember looking for a tool to help me price cars. The reason why I stumbled upon Stockwave was not for inventory acquisition purposes, but when I was pricing my inventory, I was constantly felt like I still, despite the market research that I was doing on my own without Stockwave and the tools available through there, I still had a lot of question marks above my head, right? Am I priced right according to the market? Am I taking these options into consideration, right? How quickly do these cars sell in our market? Has my car been aging too long? And those were questions that I was not able to easily find answers to. And a lot of our my pricing method consisted of almost educated guessing, I would say, right? And I found Stockwave, which easily allowed me to gauge the market, find out where we need to be at to be competitively, etc. And that's how I started using it. And our inventory acquisition process was actually super old school, right? Clipboards, lists, papers, notes, going live to the auctions, physically touching and smelling these vehicles and matching them to the CRs, right? And 99% of our buying was done in lane back then, right? So slowly but surely, as I became more comfortable with Stockwave, and I think Rich, who is our Stockwave rep, held my hand throughout the process to make sure that I know the software, I know the market metrics, what they mean too. And once I had that confidence in the product and I saw how much success I was having with the product when pricing my inventory, that's when we opened up the door to incorporate it into our inventory acquisition process as well.
So I'm kind of curious about the pricing part. So tell me how you're using Stockwave to do that. Is it looking at the retail information that you can see in Stockwave and then backing out to find out what you think you can pay for the car?
Absolutely. I mean, through the glance, right, I'm able to see all the different market metrics, book values, MMR, of course, and then current what is out there right now, what's within my 100 or 150 mile radius within me, what do dealers have on the lot currently. So it's that one overall snapshot and everything is in one place that's been extremely essential, right? So I don't need to go into cars.com and search for a specific vehicle to find listings for that car, right? To gauge what our competitors are doing. I have that readily available for me at the click of a button through the glance and Stockwave.
And jumping back to the point of acquisition, Vaida. So as you brought Stockwave in, or pre-Stockwave, where did you guys go? Was it mostly local auctions? And I'm just kind of curious how Stockwave may have helped you expand the auctions where you're acquiring inventory, and if you're buying them from farther out than maybe you ever have before.
Nowadays, we buy the cars that we buy here locally in the Chicagoland area and then the Midwest are, I will say, far and few in between. We have tremendously increased our search radius for vehicles. And then there's still some places, right, where transport costs don't make sense for us. And it's not the distance. A lot of the times it's certain routes that drivers don't like driving that cost more money, etc. So there's still a lot of things to be taken into consideration, right? But yes, Stockwave has helped us look out further than we typically would.
And where would you say the farthest point has been over, in your Stockwave journey from where you purchased a car?
I think before Rich went through and eliminated that, he applied that filter for me, so I don't see Hawaii cars anymore. Those are just automatically eliminated, right? But I think like I found myself appraising a couple cars out in Hawaii a couple of times, and I was like, Vaida, that is probably a little bit too far from us, right? But nothing is off the table. And, we have a tool that's super quick and efficient in providing us with, real current transport rates as well, too. So when we look, we are looking everywhere, especially nowadays when, choices are slim.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm curious about efficiency. I can just imagine you and maybe another person or two from the dealership, loaded up with paper and spending that amount of time. Have you thought about how much time it used to take to maybe investigate, size up, and acquire a car back then compared to today?
Time-wise, I think that it seems like we're still spending a lot of time appraising cars, doing the process of elimination. So I think that that's very much stayed a time-consuming thing, but probably cut in half from what it used to be, right? I think what still takes a long time is because we're looking out further. We are looking at more, right? So there's still a time-consuming process of elimination that needs to be done, but it's efficient. Through the note system in Stockwave, I have clear and direct communication with my buyers, right? I'm able to add my comments and my notes to them that if they scan that vehicle live at an auction, they're able to see my input already, or vice versa, right? So I think efficiency, we're still spending a lot of time doing our due diligence as far as, sourcing our inventory, but the efficiency has increased tremendously. And I think it used to take us 5 hours to maybe just look through the cars that are running at Mannheim, Chicago this Thursday, right? Now, during that 5-hour period, we're probably able to hit all of the Midwest, right? And look at Mannheim, Chicago, look at Mannheim, Milwaukee, look at Mannheim, Ohio, and your Mannheim, Iowa, right? So with using the same amount of time, we're able to accomplish a lot more.
And for you, and maybe your buyers too, what are you doing now with that additional time? What does that maybe free you up to do? And I'm sure there's a million things you could be doing, but is there something you're now able to do that maybe you weren't able to do before because you were so time pressed?
Absolutely. It's allowed us to hold auctions and sellers a little bit more accountable, right? I think back in the day when things used to take too long and we were so caught up in the inventory acquisition process, by the time that cars would hit our service center, reconditioning would be backed up, right? We're not looking at those cars and we're not inspecting them right away. That time for arbitration runs out, etc. Right? So the reconditioning process as a result is a lot smoother for us as well, because we're all working more efficiently. And I think we're working smarter, not harder, right? So we now have the time and the manpower to be able to get on these cars quicker, inspect them quicker, put in the arbitrations sooner before that time expires, right? Or deal shield a car and send it back, where typically the new arrivals were not as prioritized as they are today.
Interesting. And you mentioned something about instructing your buyers and keeping in tune with your buyers as they're actually, acquiring cars. So just so I could tell us a little bit about that process. My first thought there, Vaida, is that you're going through finding the cars and suggesting this is the list to the buyers, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell us a little bit more about how that works.
So we do have our StockWave strategy business plan set up in StockWave, right, which essentially tells you the holes that you need to fill in your inventory, right? So that's just one, I would say, parameter that our buyer has, right? And if he's looking at a car, it's very simple. That's either a car that we need or that's a car that we don't need. We do have the buy list set up too. So the cars that are added into our daily buy lists, those lists are made up of cars that I find and I pick out, and also cars that our buyers find and pick out too, right? So they all go into one list. However, I am never in the dark, and I always know what my guys are going out there looking at and what they're bidding on. And before they do that, I have the opportunity to review those lists, be able to clearly see the notes all in one place, gauge the market metrics, right? And make sure that I have the same good feeling about that piece of metal as they do, right? And a lot say if there's something, there's always the question of you look at all the market metrics, you look at the notes, and you still can't wrap your brain around why would my buyer put that in the list, right? And that's a quick phone call and a conversation. What do you see that I don't see? But we're able to do that very efficiently and very smoothly using StockWave.
Vaida, if I could add, Lance, I want to ask one question here about the business plan.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that, you have a business plan. You also mentioned you did a lot of subprime business, or, a percentage of that. Is your business plan different? Because I know with subprime cars, we're typically just looking to book that car out against, what the finance, what the bank books it out at, right? Which is usually, NADA, now JD Powers, Clean Trade. How does that factor into your strategy?
We look at that. We look at book values all the time too. So I think that on our presets, we look at JD Power at those book out values. Absolutely. So that has, especially nowadays, that cars are so expensive, right? And our cost to acquire a car has gone up significantly. Will we able to finance that car? That's a big key aspect of it that my buyers must keep in the back of their heads when they're appraising a vehicle and determining whether it's right for inventory. But that's, again, an additional step that we would have to take separately, right? Without StockWave, we would have to go out of the way to use a different tool, copy and paste the VINs, and, to get those book values, where now we're just see them at first glance, literally.
So you're looking at the car really from a retail perspective, but then you're kind of, checking it back against the ability to finance it as well. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch in the same analysis, right?
That is correct.
Awesome.
I'm curious, Vaida, earlier on you mentioned, and this goes back to pre-StockWave, that about 99% of your buying was in lane. So what's that percentage of in lane versus online look like today?
I would say that today it's 95% online and maybe about 5% in lane. Like I said, the cars that we get here locally, which is where we have the opportunity to be in lane, are far and few in between nowadays. So 95, if not 98% of our buying is now done through simulcast and online. Okay.
And for that 5%, I'm just going to guess, but no one's going to the auction unless you know a car is there. Or is that, does somebody still go just to keep a finger on the pulse?
It depends. If there's it depends on the inventory that we're looking at too, right? And if it's something that's rougher, right, that we feel like we might be willing to buy that as is red light car because it looks and smells pretty clean and we're not that scared of that CR, right? If my buyer has an opportunity to go physically touch and smell that vehicle and turn it on prior to the sale, we do that. But I would say that those cars are, 1 or 2 out of 20 that we find that way, right? And it's just us doing our due diligence to make sure that we're never buying in the dark, right? But that we're covering all bases and decreasing our risk that way.
Patrick, I had a question for you. It's sort of a broader perspective context question. I was impressed with what Vaida shared about the two-way dialogue with buyers, but dealer to buyer. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we want to play this. My sense is that that's a tighter ship than maybe what you see broadly. Can you give us a little color on that, please?
Yeah, I tell you the most emerging application for Stockwave lately, which has really kind of been blowing my mind. I always thought it was useful for this, but I've never heard dealers actually doing it. And, we had an earlier podcast last week that we did with someone who was using it. Vaida, you're doing it for the same thing. I'm going to age myself here. Lance, you're with me on this, but I remember the old Franklin planner, right? Where you had an organizational process, to be able to keep track of certain things you had to do in your tasks, and you moved your notes forward. To hear Vaida say that, hey, we're using Stockwave to document the different folks in the system, looking at cars and making those notes, and those notes follow the car, so that everyone can get a view of what the comments are, is really cool to me, because, we are seeing a lot more, I wouldn't call it, let's call it centralized buying, or I should say team effort at buying, because it's such a massive process, right? It's very time consuming. When you got, multiple cooks in the kitchen, you got to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I just love the fact that Vaida brought that up, that, they're using it for that reason. And I think it's kind of a best kept secret of Stockwave, because where else without clipboards and paper, and you don't know that anybody's going to get the right clipboard for the day, do you share that information? So that's really cool to see. But they are definitely on the cutting edge of using Stockwave for every dollar that they're paying for it.
Sure. I think that what I would love to add and stress too is not only are we doing that for when we're looking at cars out at auctions too, we're using it for our trade-ins as well at the store, right? So if it's so nice, right? Because if I get in Monday and we have 3-4 fresh trades from Saturday, I don't have condition reports for those cars, right? I just see a new V3 vehicle, a new trade-in that's stocked in, and I can go out and try to find it on the lot and see what condition it's in, if it's rough, if it's got good or bad tires on it, etc. Right? That's a simple conversation to be had with my sales manager. Hey, tell me about the cars that we took in on trade, right? But I don't need to do that anymore. I'm able to put in the VIN of that car into Stockwave, and I see those detailed appraisal notes in there already, right? The work that the car needs, what we think that we want to pay for it, what the customer wants for it, kind of where the whole journey of how that car ended up in our inventory is there for me to see, right? So I'm not in the dark, and I'm not wondering and asking those questions of, how does that car sit on my lot today? I have that information stored and saved in it already. And then based on the notes and based on the information that they provide for me, right, using the quick glance, I already have an idea of how much work and how much recon we're going to put into that car, what I'm going to price that car in, and what that time frame is, right? So if the car needs a lot of cosmetic repairs, right, and body shops backed up, I know that car's probably at least a week and a half out before I'm going to have it frontline ready, right? So it helps us manage multiple different aspects of the business, I would say.
Fantastic. I'm kind of curious, is your dad still involved in the operation?
He's not. So my dad was never on the retail side of the business, actually. He's a big automotive export logistics guy. So they do overseas export and inland transportation here. And he was never very much involved in the retail side of the business. So prior to my journey here, we had a different dealer principal that was running the store. That was not a family member, right? So it's very much a family business. But I would say that the bits and pieces that my father gets involved in are just kind of like the fun stuff, right? Like he gives us fun consignment cars to sell, and but he's a very, very old school guy. And I think that, showing him Stackwave and like the tools that we use now, it's very intimidating to him for sure.
How does he feel about the way you're running things? I mean, I guess I understand maybe the weirdness or intimidation factor, but from what I'm getting here, Vaida, it just sounds like you're really taking the operation up a notch or two.
Absolutely. So I think my goal from the start of it, right, with everything that I had learned and what my knowledge and my experience that I was bringing to the table, and it's still to this day my belief that while we are an independent used car store, there's no reason why I can't apply franchise practices, principles, and processes to our operation, right? So that can be said for anything, right? Inventory acquisition, reputation management, brand management, etc., retaining your employees. So that's always been my goal. And I like to think that I run a tight ship. Everyone does have a little bit of sense of freedom, right? And wiggle room to be in flexibility, to be able to do things that they feel like are best, right? But we all have parameters, right? And those parameters are established by me.
Understood. So a final question, Vaida, as you look to take the ship forward through the remainder of 2022 and into 2023, what might you list as, say, one or two key priorities that you have as dealer principal for your business to meet the goals that you have in mind?
It's being extremely strategic with our inventory acquisition process, right? I heard this on one of your previous podcasts. I think it was a couple of months ago, but it stuck with me, guys, and I loved it. I think the one dealer kept saying it over and over again: stay lean, right? So we still very much have that mentality, and we are staying lean. We continue to acquire new inventory, but very strategically, and only what we know works and what sells and what we can turn quick. This is not a time for us to be trying something new and reinvent the wheel and change our inventory, right? So I think we know where we're comfortable at. Goal ultimately would be to get my store back to 200 cars live advertised on my app and my website. Will the market allow me to do that right now? I don't know. Time will tell, but I do not feel comfortable doing that at this time, right? So we will get back to that, but it's when the market will allow us.
And when you reach that point, where would you anticipate your retail? So let's say you're at a point where you have 200 cars on the lot advertised. What would you expect your retail sales to look like then?
I have to turn at least 50% of that inventory on a monthly basis.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. Wonderful. Patrick, any final questions or thoughts from you?
No, just Vaida, kudos to your operation, and you're leveraging technology. You talked about, hey, we need to be franchise-like. Well, there's a lot of franchise dealers that don't leverage the technology like you all are doing, from what I'm hearing.
Well, my goal, and my goal would be too, and I keep telling Rich that I feel like I've learned Stackwave now, right? I'm a believer. It's my Bible. My salespeople use it as a closing tool too. I forgot to tell you guys that. And it helps them. It helps them close customers. It helps them hold their gross. I can talk all day about that, right? But there's products that offer more than Stackwave does, like vAuto. But I don't know what it's called. But anyway, guys, my goal is to be able to graduate to that towards the end of the year and to be able to dive into that data and those analytics on a much deeper level and whatnot. And I think that there's so much useful information to be had there as well. So I think that this is just very much the beginning for us. It's been a game changer in a good way, but it's just the start of our journey with Stackwave and vAuto.
I'll say, Vaida, if you stay focused on your affordability strategy, the market will be kind to you. So we're just seeing the numbers and the projections of inventory in the next couple of years. and the price points of new cars, staying down because folks still need affordable transportation, and it's harder to buy those cars, but you guys are using the technology, you're grinding it out and you're finding them. They're out there. They just take a little more work, maybe take a little more risk in terms of CR scores, but I compliment you. If you stay on that strategy, the market will reward you, because it's, with interest rates going up, that payment car is going to get, that price point's going to have to come down to make it affordable. So stay with it, and I think you're going to do great.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Vaida. Thank you, Patrick. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to this episode of the vAuto podcast. Until next time, stay well.